Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. It's been a minute. I was off for the last week and it's great to be back here with you. Welcome. So today's topic is money and money trauma and money taboos and what we can do to break through them and how healing that can be, how money acts as a wonderful catalyst for transformation and growth. So before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Welcome, Rosalind. So good to see you here with us this morning. Today we're going to talk about money, but before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the movement, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. Allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, why not kick off our reunion here today with talking about money. Money is such a polarizing topic or catalyzing topic. It's such a source of anxiety and fear and shame, embarrassment, judgment for so many people, and yet we really don't discuss it very much. You know, it's we hold our deep, dark money secrets. We don't talk about how much money we're making, or we don't talk about our debt, and we don't talk about our financial situations. And yet we live in a culture where the prevalent beliefs are things like money makes the world go round, and on the other side, you can't buy happiness, or money is the root of all evil, which isn't the proper quote. It's the love of money is the root of all evil. But we have all these beliefs about money, but we don't really talk about it very often, not in polite company, right? And so we're going to have a look at this, and what the genesis of this conversation is that I'm in the process of putting together a course about our relationship with money, about transforming our relationship with money. And the thing that's so interesting is that, you know, we go to 12 years of elementary school and then college, and we're not taught fundamental things about money. We're not taught how to balance a checkbook. We're not taught about interest rates. We're not taught about investing. You know, we are kind of left to figure it out on our own. unless we are fortunate enough to be taught those things in our families. And the degree of financial illiteracy in this country from people who are quite literate and educated is staggering, particularly in light of the fact that our culture is so much about material possessions and material achievement and money. So Rosalind says, my friend has worked for the federal government for 10 years. This year, her student loans were forgiven, which was a condition for getting her loan paid off. That's pretty awesome. I don't know if that's, I'm not on top of what the forgiveness is for student loans. I paid tens of thousands of dollars in student loans, and I got off easy compared to lots of people who have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans. And I had gone back to school at one point. I went back to school when I was 40, and I was paying off student loans for years and years. And yeah, it's the student loan situation is crazy. And it's another form of indentured servitude, really. You know, if you go and you have a student loan for hundreds of thousands of dollars that and are trying to start a career, you know, that can be crippling. It can keep you in debt and unable to pay your way or to be able to find good living circumstances. I mean, instead of buying a house, for instance, you would be paying off student loans. And it's very hard to get ahead of that. And so, I mean, the whole educational system where they're empowered to charge that kind of money for college education in itself is obscene, really. And well, don't get me started. That's not what we're talking about today. We are talking about debt and the taboo around money and talking about money and learning about money and contextualizing our relationship with it. So I in the process of putting this course together, I'm reading books on money, and a number of them have exercises in them. And so the book I'm reading now is called The Energy of Money. And there was an exercise in it that was super powerful that I avoided like the plague, but it was super powerful. And it was called My Money Autobiography, and writing out what our history is of money. I was going to call today's topic money trauma, but I think we're going to have a lot more money topics for a bit as I'm developing this thing, but we'll see. Anyway, in writing this money autobiography, it brought present so many instances in my life related to shame around money, like deep, 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 deep shame, embarrassment, guilt. So Rosalind says, I heard of writing a love letter to money for a chosen period of time, 30, 45, or 60 days. Yeah, I've heard of, I didn't know that it was like a daily practice, but I've heard also of writing a love letter to money. Like if you were treating money as a lover, how would you be interacting with it differently? I think I'm a big proponent of clearing old trauma. And when I was writing this autobiography, it brought to the fore a lot of really extreme trauma. And the interesting thing is that it wasn't even the obvious big traumas that really triggered me, because before I ever got to them, there were these other things that had happened from when I was a lot younger. Like, this was an interesting one when I guess I was a early teenager, and I had an allowance and I had birthday money that I had been saving. And my best friend at the time had her heart's desire was this steaming facial thing. It was you'd put your face in and it would give steam and it would open your pores, and that it was her heart's, it was just like her dream. And I think it was something like $25 at the time. So that was a long time ago. It was probably the equivalent of $50 or more now. I don't know. Anyway, I didn't, I had some money and she wanted this thing and I bought it for her. And I was so excited to give it to her. And her father was furious because it was such an extravagant gift. And I don't remember if I ended up having to return it or if she was able to keep it. I don't remember the details of it, other than that I was mortified. I was absolutely embarrassed by his reaction and made wrong for this act of generosity. And, I just wanted to be able to give something to my friend that she would enjoy and that she really, really, really wanted. And so that was an early memory. And I think that there are many things like that then shape us and our relationship to money. I also remember, like, my father was a veterinarian and he'd have ups and downs in his veterinary practice. So if he ever had a bad day, it was like, oh my God, I'm losing the practice. And so there was all this pent up anxiety and fear around money and about support and stability. And then I remember there was one time, and I'm not saying that my memories are clear. These are just memories that I have. Whether they're true or not, I couldn't attest to. But there was another time when he felt like his practice was going down the drain, and I guess he I don't know how tight things were, but in the face of that, we had gone to some kind of art show, and he purchased this piece of art, this sculpture that he really loved. And it was like, well, there may not be enough, but there's beauty, that here he chose to spend his last pennies, although I doubt that they were his last pennies, on something that lit his soul up and that was beautiful. And so I think that that's had a huge impact on me as well. Maybe for the good, maybe not for the good. I don't think it's black and white, but that when you see something that you really love, or when I see something that I really love, I've learned to go for it. And I've also often gone for things that I wanted until I had them. That's something that many of us do. I have to have that. I have to have that. I have to have that. And then you get whatever that is, and it's no longer relevant. It doesn't fill the gap that you thought it was going to fill in some way, shape, or form. So it's interesting. It was interesting to be revisiting these situations. My dad had given me a gift of a watch that I wanted. It was my heart's desire. I wanted it so badly. I loved it. And then one day I was in my car and it was really hot. I was at a park and I left my windows open, and I had left the watch in the car, and the watch got stolen. And I felt such deep grief and guilt and shame. And, it was an expensive gift. And I was not allowed really to forget it. And I carried such guilt around it of my own, that I don't know that I ever had relieved myself of. So I've been doing some work around that and other emotions around money. But I think that there's, carrying that guilt, there's a self-punishing that can occur as a result of that. And also impressions of, self-worth, but also feeling like a loser, like defining oneself as a loser or unworthy to have things because we lose them literally, or whatever the story is. It's an important thing for us to be able to unearth those stories and look at them straight on, to have honesty about them, as painful as it might be, to be re-experiencing that guilt and that shame. We want to cover it over and bury it and pretend, like put it in a deep, dark hole somewhere so that we don't have to contend with it. But the truth is that those things, those traumas, those early beliefs, those early experiences and not so early experiences tend to shape our lives and shape our future behaviors until we clean it up. And so clearing money trauma, which I would venture to say we all have money trauma, clearing money trauma is a really important thing. I mean, if money is, or arguments over money are one of the primary causes for dissolution of relationships. So if we're carrying forward trauma from our lives around money, how can we not bring them into our relationships, bring those trauma or traumatic responses into our relationships? And so, interestingly, we've been deeply conditioned to tie our self-worth to money, and that's cultural. And we have cultural norms in our own families, cultural patterns in our own families, as well as our maybe even our religious culture or our ethnic culture. Money is an important, like a canary in a coal mine, in a way, a signaling vehicle to allow us to see reflections of ourselves and our deep internal makeup a lot of times. So Rosalind said, my ex said he was poor growing up, so that validated him buying what he wanted. So I've seen, it's so interesting, Rosalind, and everybody else. It's so interesting that as I've been putting my attention on developing this course around money and clearing ourselves to be able to actually live into the future instead of living from the past when it comes to money. Money has come up with so many of my clients. Issues around money have come up with so many of my clients. So I really see how, if we're to free ourselves to be able to be at choice around how we live, meaning, what level of materialism we live, or whatever, we tend to do so many things on automatic, and have so many unconscious money behaviors, or behaviors that relate to how we are, how we consume, and a displacement of values happens around money pretty readily. Abuses, or overextending ourselves. So I have a client who grew up poor, and as a result, they also are extravagant with themselves, but beyond their means. And I remember there was a time for myself when I was just going through deep, dark depression, that I would just put money on a credit card. I mean, I would put things I was buying on a credit card all the time. And it got me into a very, very deep, dark place, with tremendous debt, because I was trying to fill up a deep void within myself with things, and treat myself, where in actuality I was kind of burying myself. And so people do justify buying things because they want a treat, or they feel like they need a treat. And we've been trained to look externally for those treats, right? Rather than resourcing ourselves from a deeper place of being, right? Rather than just going and giving ourselves a treat of nature, or, we often feel deprived. We compare ourselves to others and then decide that we're deprived, and therefore we get to give ourselves treats of things. It's very, very interesting. And I want to get back to this idea of trauma around money. I think that it's a powerful exercise to write your money autobiography. And there are all kinds of questions around that, but I was particularly interested for myself in the trauma piece, because there's been a lot of that for me around money. And I have done a lot of work, but I was still able to source deep grief and guilt and shame and embarrassment that still was calling for healing. And so that's super, super powerful, to be looking at what are the feelings, what are the emotions, what are the emotional patterns, the behavioral patterns that we have around money. Where will we drop a pile of money without without thinking about it, and then maybe feel tremendously guilty and foolish and shamed on the other side of it? Where is it that we haven't been able to find an even place of understanding value, or attributing value to money? Lots of us will say, I don't care about money. I used to say, I don't care about money. And yet money ran my life. Even though it wasn't my first point of decision making, it still was deep source of anxiety and fear, not knowing how I was going to make my way. So it's a powerful exercise, because this is the money autobiography. It's a powerful exercise because it pulls you into a level of truth about what's there or what's been there. Just the facts, not, like you can say all the feelings that came out of it, but what happened? What are the things that happened? So I invite you to really give it a shot. Write a money autobiography, like your life and relationship to money. And I'll bet that certain memories come to the fore that might have been latent for quite some time. And you can bring them back into awareness. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. There's so many more stories, and I'm looking forward to exploring this more deeply with you, because it is something that affects us all on one level or another, and probably on levels that we're not even conscious of. I would venture to bet that that's the truth. And lots of suffering around money. Some joy, lots of suffering. So let's dig more deeply into this over the next while. And it's great to be back here with you, and wonderful to have you courageously joining into these conversations. So much appreciation for you and your openness. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I encourage you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living on Facebook. And until next time, so much love to you.